My name is Kevin Owocki, and I'm the founder of a project called Gitcoin, which is not a token. It's a place where you can get coins. Basically, we want to be the incentivization layer to GitHub's collaboration layer. And the way that that works is that you can put an Ether or ERC20 bounty on any open GitHub issue on any software development scope, and then that'll get paid out when a developer turns around that scope. So kind of think gig economy, but with good wages for open source software.
Interesting. You're incentivizing open source development with crypto.
Yeah.
How did this idea come about? I'm curious. Was this an issue you always wanted to solve?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as a software engineer, I don't know how much of your audience is software engineers, but everything that I've built in my career, my 10-year career as an entrepreneur, has been based off of open source web servers and database servers and application frameworks, and those software frameworks have provided a lot of economic value, but the expected value of them is free. So the idea is that with blockchain, we now have programmable money. We can program our values into our money, and we can create these double-sided markets. Maybe we can kind of collapse those two data points that are very far away from each other, billions of dollars a year in economic value and $0 in actual payment for usage of a software package, and maybe we can create a more rational market for software development. So I mean, I guess that's the long answer to your question. The short answer is yes, it's something that I needed in my day-to-day life.
Wow. And you said you've had extensive experience in startups, 15 years to be exact. How did you find yourself in the startup space? Was that the pace in which you always felt you worked at best?
Yeah. So if there's any software engineers who are out there and are trying to figure out what you're going to do with your career, you're certainly not alone, and I think everyone goes through that stage. For me in particular, I graduated with a computer science degree from a public university on the East Coast, and they just sort of ushered me into corporate America after I graduated. I didn't know that startups were even a thing at that time. And at that time, this is 2007, 2008, the Facebook platform had just come out, and people could for the first time use Facebook in order to deploy their applications to the world. And I built a Facebook application nights and weekends while I was working the corporate job that very soon was making more money from the Facebook application as I was from my corporate job. And at that point I was like, holy smokes, there's this whole startup ecosystem out there that I didn't even know about, that I now have legitimacy in because I've done entrepreneurial stuff, and that sort of lit the fire for me that there was an unbeaten path that I could go down, and I've been doing startups ever since. So that was 2007-ish. It's been about 11 years since that happened, and I've never been happier being in startups.
I love that. I love the progression in which you came about it, because it's not like, for me personally too. I worked a 9-to-5 job that was very soul crushing. It was very limiting in terms of what they enabled you to want to learn. There wasn't much incentivization to learn outside, right?
Yeah.
And so, you kind of have to have the initiative as a software developer and a software engineer to basically say, if you're in that system, that there is a framework that is unbounded. And it seems that you found that framework. Is just like, how do you communicate with someone that doesn't know any better? They've been programmed to just program.
Yeah.
How do you tell that person, like, hey, you can work for yourself?
Yeah, so I think that in order to succeed as an entrepreneur, you do need to have a certain amount of drive and intellectual curiosity and to want to go off the beaten path. And I've never seen anyone succeed who doesn't have that drive intrinsically. But I would be remiss if I didn't note that I'm a person of considerable privilege. I'm like a white middle-class guy from the East Coast of the United States who doesn't have any student debt or medical debt, and my parents are both very high-functioning people who have good jobs, and so not everyone can go into being an entrepreneur like I was lucky enough to be. So I think a combination of being able to manage the downside of entrepreneurship is one thing, but also having a lot of intellectual curiosity and excitement about the upside is what I think is the formula to be an entrepreneur.
I'm interested because you talk about getting off the beaten path, so to speak. Well, where is the beaten path going to take you next, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would define the beaten path as doing a 9 to 5 job as a software engineer. To be super drilled in, focus on creating value in a very specific niche inside of a corporation, I think is what I would define as the beaten path. And the unbeaten path for me in entrepreneurship, the path that I've taken, there's probably many unbeaten paths, is raising VC money and starting a startup, being a lead engineer, which requires a focus on a breadth of things, not just the depth of one specific thing. And so I have a degree in computer science and a programmer, but I also do product work. I'm also like a kumbaya around the campfire community guy out in Colorado.
Yeah, I see that. You're very like communicable. It's really cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I just have breadth of skills, I think, is the answer to your question.
I think moving forward, man, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I could ask you about a lot of things, but I guess, what are you most passionate about? If it's Gitcoin, if it's not, where does the passion come from? Like, are you just happy to keep on building? Like, what is it? Is it for the money? Like, what is advancing you forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think a lot about, because Gitcoin is a platform for jobs in the 21st century, I think a lot about what motivates people to do those jobs. And I do think that it's more than just being well compensated. An economist might say supply and demand, and if you're paid a certain rate, you'll do a certain job. But I think it's more intrinsic than that. I think that people want to do work that aligns with their values, and I think they want to do work that has an impact. And so that's what we design a lot of our work at Gitcoin around. And I think that that's how I think about my own motivation. I want to do work that has an impact on others. So for me, that means connecting engineers to jobs that align with their values and compensate well. I want to do work that aligns with my values, and my values are open source software and contributing to the commons and doing something that hopefully makes the world a better place in this new weird techno-utopia or dystopia we're building.
Dude. That's such a refreshing perspective, man. Honestly, that's not the motive I've been hearing a lot of.
Yeah, well, and then the third one, I'll be honest, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, is that I want to be well compensated. I have a mortgage, and I have a baby, and I have a golden retriever, and I need to pay for all those things. And so that's the third part of motivation for people in this space. And I think that as you noted, it's probably overrepresented with a lot of people who are doing ICOs and tokens, but it's
a lot of that messaging gets lost in that framework of crowdfunding right now.
Yeah, and I think that being mission-driven, I'll probably never work for a company that's not mission-driven in the future, just because it's such a clear way to articulate a unifying message to a team and to a community. Our mission is to grow open source, and open source is an unequivocal good for the world. So we just follow that North Star, and that keeps us going.